Good evening to everybody. First of all, let me thank the Faculty of Social Science, Humanities and Arts for the invitation to deliver this inaugural lecture. This is my first time in Cape Verde. Although I have followed developments in Cape Verde for quite some time now, since I was an undergraduate student at the University of Ghana. It gives me a lot of pleasure to be here with you today. I'm also very grateful for the warm hospitality and kind reception extended to me since my arrival yesterday by Dr. Varira and my good friend Sedu Bangula, who spent the whole time yesterday waiting for me at the airport as I went through the problem of justifying why I should be here as an ECOWAS citizen. I think the topic for this lecture is quite timely and important. That is the political economy of regional integration in West Africa or Africa. I don't know the names, but the director and the director of the West African Institute, everybody here, as my friends in Nigeria would say, all protocols observed. When I received the invitation to prepare this paper and present it here in Cape Verde, the first name that came to mind was Amilcar Cabral. We in Ghana have also seen him as our hero, given his strong revolutionary nationalist history. And as I thought about him, the positional question kept coming to me, which is, what would be Cabral's position and policies on regional integration in contemporary times if he was still alive and leading the quest for transformation in Lusophone Africa? I found this question to be quite important, and what I was trying to read his mind as I looked at some of the books and then some of the speeches he made. In the speech he delivered at the third conference of the African Peoples in Cairo in 1961, Cabral said, and I quote, "We are for African unity on a regional and continental scale, so far as it is necessary for the progress of the African people, and in order to guarantee their security and continuity of progress." In 1957, that's some 4 years back, before then, Kwame Nkrumah of Ghana, and I'm sure you've heard of his name too, during the anniversary, the first anniversary of Ghana's independence, also had this to say, again I quote, that finally, Ghana, our beloved country, is free. But then the independence of Ghana was meaningless unless it was linked up with the total liberation of the African continent. Now, I find this to be quite important, that in less than a decade, two very prominent African leaders were talking about continental unity and the need to decolonize the entire Africa. There was a book, a piece of writing I found yesterday on the net while I was trying to look more at his works, Cabral. There is this paper which is not related to the topic as such, but it is on the rather important topic of national liberation and revolution. And he entitled it The Weapon of Theory, which was a paper he presented in Havana in 1966 at the Tricontinental Conference of the Peoples of Asia, Africa, and Latin America. I found this work to be quite interesting because in this work it tries to theorize about the need for Africans to liberate themselves and also in the process unite. And I would suggest to the students, especially those who have not seen it, to look at it. Of course, Cabral is not with us today. Nkrumah is not here today. And we have to find ways of dealing with the problems of continental unity or regional unity. Regional integration has actually been on the agenda for many nations. There have been quite some remarkable accomplishments, notably in terms of political, economic, and security and institutional cooperation for integration on the African continent. Regretfully, nevertheless, disappointments have also prevailed, as actual implementation of agreements and protocols often does not match the declared ambitions. While the complexity of the regional integration agenda is acknowledged, the resulting implementation gap is often commonly attributed to the lack of political will and leadership, institutional weaknesses, and multiple capacity and resource constraints. I think to deal with these things, I have decided to ask a number of questions, which are very difficult questions, and they are no run-of-the-mill questions, and they are questions that if we try to answer, we may be able to locate the roadmap towards continental or African integration. And here are the questions. I want all of us to reflect and ponder over them. At the national level, how can the emergence of a new generation of regionalists or regional integrationists be fostered to spearhead the quest for paradigm shift that regional integration entails? How can we do that? 2, what cross-national strategies are required to fill the gaps in regional integration that have been created by external powers? We're talking of Anglophone Africa, Francophone Africa, Lusophone Africa. All these create gaps, and how do we develop them? And yesterday, as I moved from Accra to Abidjan to Dakar, finally to this country, I saw in very practical terms how the idea of free movement of people within the ECOWAS sub-region, it's a sham. So how do we, what strategies do we have, or can we put in place to deal with these gaps? 3, I'm moving now to the global level. At the global level, how can the African diaspora be incentivized to become more organized and influential in advancing regional integration, especially in relation to global political dynamics that negatively impact on regional integration in Africa, such as, for example, divisive bilateral trade agreements? And this question will probably resonate powerfully in Cape Verde, where I understand the majority of the population are in exile, in diaspora, rather. 4, what are the prospects and opportunities for constructively engaging African business sector in forging regional integration in ways that go beyond limited business interests to prioritize people-centered regional development? 5, how can we heighten civic role of the arts and culture in advancing an enduring political economy of regional integration? In other words, how do we integrate the cultural superstructure and the economic substructure of regional integration? 6, using a dialectical framework, how can we envisage and plan for mitigating any internal contradictions that might be embodied in full-scale regional integration? In other words, what potential antitheses might emerge from the synthesis of regional integration? Here, I'm imagining something like weakened national level political parties, and so on. It's just a theoretical idea, but I think it's one that could have veritable practical implications for Africa. And finally, I wonder what the implications of the Trump presidency in the United States would mean for the broader economy of African integration. Already he seems to be contradicting himself. On one hand, he's talking about multilateralism and world trade. On the other hand, he's trying to force some alliances and so on and so forth. So we need to find how this is going to play out. The contradiction between his preference for multilateral free trade and regional blocks or regional integration. As I indicated, these are no run-of-the-mill questions. They are very, very important questions, and I would try to look at some of these. And I also would suggest that we all ponder over these as we begin to reflect on the issue of regional integration. But to set the tone and prepare the background, I would like to say a word or two about the African condition. That would then give us the opportunity to be able to conclude as to what we really need to do. Let me begin with one Nigerian political economist, the late Claude Ake. Ake wrote an interesting book, A Theory of Political Integration, several years back. In this book, he notes that the crucial problem of the post-colonial situation is the integration of the new nation, which is threatened by strong centrifugal forces. The nationalist movement, according to him, invariably was a coalition of ethnic, professional, religious, and social groups, but tended to be disintegrated with the elimination of the imperial control. At the same time, the solidarity of the political leaders suffers partly because of differences in approach to the problems of administering and developing a country which now loom large. The optimistic psychological atmosphere characteristic of revolutions raises expectations to heights that the new government cannot possibly satisfy with the meager means at their disposal. The divergence of hope and fulfillment tends to cause frustration and estrangement or alienation. Some people seek to compensate themselves for the frustration of colonial oppression by enjoying their newly won freedom with exuberance. And sometimes there is almost a pathological hatred for all forms of social and legal control. All these tensions and cleavages, according to Claude Ake, arise in a period of rapid social change, when, because many traditional usages are being abandoned and habituation of new ones yet uncompleted, expectations in regard to roles and responses are temporarily confused. This is the chaotic situation faced by new government with limited experience and yet trying to establish legitimacy. The crucial problem is how to establish and maintain authority under such difficult conditions. Ake then identifies cleavages in the nationalist movement, elite competition, cleavages in the social structure, and the problems of policy as the major centrifugal pulls which impede the integration of these states in the immediate post-colonial period. To summarize Ake here, there are simply sharp divisions within the nationalist movement, among the elite and the social structure, and these have combined to obstruct integration in Africa. So clearly you see Ake trying to use the political economy framework or narrative to explain why it's becoming increasingly difficult or almost impossible for Africa to integrate. But where does Africa stand? I would say, as one author I was reading last night says, that Africa is simultaneously large but small. And that's quite important. First, this author is saying that Africa is larger than the United States, Europe, Brazil, France, and Japan combined. At the same time, the gross domestic product of 47 economies of sub-Saharan Africa is approximate the GDP of Belgium. And that reveals to us the fact that Africa is large but small. Now, the median GDP is about $4 billion, making sub-Saharan Africa look like a modern city in North America or Europe. Basic services to median population, it's about 50 million. Infrastructure over medium land is equivalent to France. So this gives us reason to conclude that simultaneously, Africa is large but small. Large in terms of space, but small in terms of economy. Now, if Africa is that large, then the question is it necessary for such huge continent or aspects of it to unite? My answer, just like what Cabral and Nkrumah said, is yes. I believe that if Africa or the continent as a whole, or aspects of it, unite or integrate, Africa will be too big to fail. Now, if we take, for example, the case of China, in the last 30 years, China has been a successful story. Everybody's talking about China. But imagine how different the picture might have been if China was divided into 54 states, each with its own custom laws, its own currency, and national infrastructure, which do not even link up properly with their neighbors. Does anyone believe that a China saddled with such divisions could have grown so quickly to be the world's biggest economy? That's why I certainly no. And I think that is one of the explanations why integration is so critical to Africa today and her citizens. In the globalized economy, size really matters. That is why some people think that the decision by Britain, for example, to withdraw or to exit the European Union will be bad for Britain itself. A large internal market provides a strong platform needed to compete across the world, driving industrialization and attracting investment. Yet, Africa is hopelessly divided into fragmented national economies, too often too small to benefit from the economies of scale. Now, there have been three major types or ways of regionalism, and I don't want to overburden you or bore you with all these things, but the first one is supposed